This is activity 56, and has to do with the equality of women. Whenever I talk about the institution of slavery and the status of slaves and equality, usually sometime in that conversation, the rights of women come up, and students almost always say something to the effect that, well, women didn't have any rights back then. Now, this is not true, that women did not have any rights, and I think if you just give it some thought, that back in the day in 1776 or so, it was wrong legally to rape a woman, to murder a woman, to steal the property of a woman. People are usually not, they're not talking about those rights, life, liberty, and property. And when I press students, they usually talk about the right to vote, and we'll talk about that later on in this activity. Sometimes also, if I press students, they'll talk about the right to property, that women were not allowed to own property. I didn't put this in this point in this activity, but I'll just share that last night I was talking with my wife, or reading a book that my wife took out of the library. It's a biography of Abigail Adams, and there on the first page makes a point that I think I'll put in future textbooks, that as a married woman, Abigail Adams did not have a right to own or bequeath by will property. And the author then goes on to say, thousands of spinsters, meaning women who never married, or widows, did have the right to own and bequeath property in a will, but married women did not. So you can see immediately that it's not true to say that women did not have a right to own property. Women who were not married did have a right to own and bequeath property, as did widows, and that's true. I was reading a history book about the early history of Virginia in the 1600s, when male mortality was very high. The widows did own property. Now, as far as married women, this is something that you may not agree with, but just to kind of understand things in the terms that they did. They took very seriously the idea that, and this goes back to, I guess it's maybe originally a Christian idea, that or a biblical idea going back to the book of Genesis, so maybe it's true in the Hebrew tradition as well, that when a man and a woman get married, they become one flesh. And another point, and I guess this also might come out of the religious tradition, but also seems to be an old tradition in other places also, just that the husband is the authority in the family. And I think when you put those things together, it becomes clear why they at least thought that a woman did not have property independently of her husband. She owned it jointly with her husband, and it was actually in the name of the husband, because he was the authority of the home. And again, there's nothing in this activity that I ask you to agree with. I just want to understand these statements. I want to understand how Americans understood women on their own terms at that time. Again, I'm going to look at the Tocqueville in letters A and B to get an account from that time period of how Americans understood the roles of women and the equality of women. You can see in letter A that one thing that de Tocqueville emphasizes is that Americans, even more than other people in the world, understood men and women as having different roles, and not having, but also I would emphasize there is a different role, and the role, as he goes on to say, is the husband is the leader of the home, and also is engaged in all the external affairs of the home. The husband goes out and works. The husband deals with politics and other outside considerations, where the woman her role has to do with affairs of the home, the raising of children, and overseeing or doing the work that takes place in the home. In letter A, in the first paragraph, you say, Tocqueville points out, consequently, you don't see an American woman direct the external affairs of the family, run a business, or enter the political sphere. This explains why women didn't vote back in the day. You'll see in another part of this activity that it had nothing to do with viewing women as inferior to men. It had to do with different roles, that the role of the man was to be involved in politics and vote, and the woman was over affairs in the home. Also in the second paragraph, he emphasizes that there was this belief that every organization needs a leader, and I think if you reflect on it, it's typically true when you have a CEO, or there's only one president of the United States, there's only one president of Richland College. Think of the different organizations out there. I don't know of any single one that has two leaders. A lot of times when I talk with students about whether a husband should be an authority or they should share authority, I ask them to point to any other organization of which they're aware where there's two people in charge with the same authority, and I can't think of one, and they haven't pointed out any either. The Tocqueville is saying here that a family, being an organization with a purpose, needs a single leader. There needs to be one person in charge, and they recognize that as being the husband. Letter B, again, the emphasis here is really on the equality between men and women, even though they have different roles. It says in letter B that Americans show the same esteem for the role of the woman as that of the man, and they consider them to be beings of equal worth. There's the fact that the man has a role in external areas and the woman in internal areas, and that the husband is in authority over the wife and the children, is not a statement that the women are inferior. At Richland College, my supervisor is a woman, her supervisor is a woman, and the president at this time of Richland College is a woman. And I'm not inferior to my supervisors. We're viewed as people of the same worth, but with different roles. And in the second paragraph of letter B, I want to explain something that de Tocqueville says here. He's somebody who's a very intelligent observer, someone aware of the world and the different cultures in the world. And he says in letter B that even though the woman in American society has this role in the home, and also is very dependent on her husband. The husband provides the wife with food, shelter, and clothing. And he points out that nowhere does her status seem to me higher. He means nowhere in the world as he reflects on the status and role, the status of women in French society, in African society, in Native American society, in Chinese society. As he looks around the world, he doesn't see women having high status, and certainly not higher than that in the United States. And when he thinks about, I think he saw the United States as an up-and-coming power, up-and-coming even to the point of being a great or greatest power in the world. He attributes the exceptional prosperity and growing strength of the American people to the superiority of the women. This is not a view that we hear nowadays. We hear so much negative, but I just think it's important to think accurately and also relative to what was happening in other societies.